Retrospect 72. Brought to you by First Federal Savings and Loan Association of Mobile.
The year 1972 was a busy one for Channel 10 newsmen and film crews. Found them in Miami at the conventions, in Montgomery, Birmingham, Tallahassee, Pensacola, Pascagoula, Gulf Shores, Selma, Tuskegee, and of course, here in Mobile and Portland County. We could possibly put together a program of everything we did in 1972. But we do have some of the highlights of our activities over the past year. We're certain that you will remember them in Retrospect 72.
It was January the 4th when Pritchard's Police Department members became activists. A sit-in took place to protest a requested pay increase being rejected by the city council. It lasted only one day, and the officers did not get their raise. Just 3 days later, a secret report named the Alabama State Docks Bulk Handling Plant the second largest air polluter in the state. The report was made by the Alabama Air Quality Control Commission, which also ordered several upstate industries to cut back production to hold down pollution. Politics got into ecology when State's Attorney General Bill Baxley held a news conference in Mobile.
Any kind of spilling on waterways is hazardous, to say the least. But when you have an area that is as small as Mobile State, just one little miscue would spell ruin for the entire bay as far as recreation, as far as the seafood industry, and wild-type wildlife. And so we think that for the money involved, the possible money involved, waste, possible danger, the danger far outweighs any benefits that could come from the office.
That petition is still being fought by Mobile Oil Company.
The Mobile County school system had a much quieter year than in years gone by, but there were some significant incidents.
The first was on January the 12th at Viger High School in Pritchard. It was said to have been a continuation of trouble from the year before. The rest of 1972 at Viger was quiet. On January 23rd, 3 persons lost their lives when a private plane crashed at Mobile's Bates Field. The 3 Birmingham residents aboard the plane were returning from a skin diving trip.
January ended with the Mobile Chamber of Commerce announcing a new program to help cut down on drug traffic.
If you know a drug pusher, call the tip line. That's the advice from the Mobile Chamber of Commerce and the Mobile Area Law Enforcement Agencies. The tip line is sponsored by the Mobile Chamber of Commerce. Crime Committee Chairman John Friend says the tip line is part of the Turn in the Pusher program. Friend says rewards will be given to those who provide information that results in arrest and conviction of pushers.
Rewards will be given in cash only upon the advice of a responsible task force. Rewards are given only after the verified and factual reports these officials are received after conviction are obtained.
Rewards will range from $100 to $500. Friend says persons providing information to the tip line will remain anonymous at all times. Benny Brabner, Channel 10 News.
Tragedy was averted on February 2nd when firemen answered an alarm to find 2 employees of a Mobile furniture company had rescued 6 small children from their burning home. Governor Wallace came to Mobile on February the 7th to inaugurate a container port and announced the construction of a coal handling facility on McDuffie Island. Both major steps in Mobile's economy.
1972 was the year of the national politician, and the first female candidate for the presidency came to Mobile on February the 11th. New York Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm was in town for a speech at the University of South Alabama.
And I think that the busing has become a kind of political football in our nation today, and it's most unfortunate. But until we have open housing in the United States of America, where black children and white children will be reflective of the neighborhood school, we're going to have to use busing as one of the artificial instruments to get this country on the right path. I think what is even more important, the Supreme Court has passed down a decision, and that decision stipulates that in order to achieve certain things in this country, it's necessary to use. Now, many of us talk about law and order. How about law and order now, in terms of what the Supreme Court decision has been?
Millions of dollars poured into the development of Gulf State Park at Gulf Shores, and the Department of Parks predicted it would soon become a major tourist site on the Gulf. March came in like a lion and zeroed in on Monroeville, Alabama, with devastating tornadoes that did many thousands of dollars in damage. Fortunately, there were no deaths or injuries. Another form of disaster struck Walsh stevedoring on Mobile's waterfront. A raging inferno gutted the property, and the cause was never determined. The next day, March the 6th, a truck-car collision on Highway 90 at the Malbus Cutoff took the lives of 4 persons. On March 24th, groups of black citizens marched on the Capitol in Montgomery with demands for welfare reform. There was no trouble and no results. But that same day, there was violence at Citronelle High School when youngsters got upset over selection of cheerleaders. Police arrested 22 persons, and there were some minor injuries. The school shut down, but was reopened the next day.
March ended with Mobile's state docks crippled by a dock strike.
The latest dispute is between the 66-member International Longshoremen's Association's Local 1459 of Clerks and Checkers and the Mobile Steamship Association. Local 1459 voted to strike last night when agreement couldn't be reached over the Clerks and Checkers' demand for a guarantee of an 8-hour workday when they were called out. Today, the ILA's smallest union put up picket lines. The lines have been honored by other ILA affiliates, numbering about 1,200 dock workers. The Mobile Steamship Association has considered filing contempt of court charges against the local, but the association's attorney, Frank McWright, would only say the group has, quote, not decided to prosecute contempt charges against the union, but this is not to say they have not been discussed, nor that they will not be filed at a later time, end of quote. A ship at the grain elevator scheduled to receive a shipment of grain wasn't loaded when picket lines were set up. 8 ships headed for Mobile were held in other Gulf ports because of the labor dispute here. Shipping officials say that each day the strike continues, it will cost the Mobile community in economic losses $500,000 a day. Bill Spencer, Channel 10 Newsbeat.
There's more to come, so stay with us on Retrospect 72. On April 4th, the state of Alabama and the state of Mississippi presented their cases to the Army Corps of Engineers. The object was to convince the engineers which state should be the site of a superport. Since then, the 2 states have joined forces and are trying to get the port just between them on the coast. Beginning the 2nd week of April, an intensive drive against narcotics was begun, resulting in an almost endless string of raids and arrests that would continue through the balance of the year. All law enforcement agencies were involved, and much credit was given to the tip line, which had begun in January.
And April was not without its share of school violence. This time, the trouble took place at Murphy High School.
One teacher and at least 3 students were slightly injured today when fistfights and rock and bottle throwing involving about 1,000 black and white students erupted at Murphy High School. Police were called in, and some sources said there was no arrest, but several youth were seen being put into a police van at the school. School officials said an investigation of the incident was underway and punitive action would be taken. They said precautions were being taken to prevent further outbreaks, but they did not elaborate on the precautions. The teacher injured in the outbreak has been identified as Roy R. Rotenberg. He was taken to a local hospital for treatment of a cut on the head. He received the cut when he was struck by an object. An injured black student, Norman Bell, 15, was treated at another hospital for abrasions and released. 2 other students were treated at the school's first aid station. One of them, an ROTC cadet, had a stab wound in the leg. Murphy Principal C.D. Anderson said the trouble began about 7:30 a.m. this morning when about 100 whites and 300 blacks gathered at the school flagpole in front. According to reliable sources, tensions caused a disturbance on the campus today. The teacher was heard to say everybody had been uptight all week. School officials are not saying what methods they will use next to prevent further outbreaks. Jordan Ray, Channel 10 Newsbeat.
For Murphy, as with Viger, this was to be the only major disturbance of the year.
On April 27th, that crippling dock strike ended, and this was welcome news to Alabama's soybean farmers who had been faced with financial disaster had the strike not ended. The contract was signed between the International Longshoremen's Association and the Steamship Association. The month of April ended with more progress. The new medical school at the University of South Alabama was dedicated with the hope the new school will ease the shortage of medical doctors in Alabama. Democrats and Republicans had their statewide primaries on May the 2nd. This was the first time for the GOP statewide, and the first time both parties had primaries on the same day. The results found Democratic incumbent John Sparkman going against Republican challenger former Postmaster General Winton Blunt. They got set for the November battle. Fish kills began to materialize, and this one in Escambia Bay, Florida, was the first of many to come. Alabama and Florida both had their share of kills, and there has as yet been no positive reason for them except possible lack of oxygen. Mother Nature continued her work, and on May the 7th, Mobile was hit by flash floods and tornadoes were reported in surrounding sections. The bad weather stretched from Mississippi to Florida, causing untold amounts of destruction, but fortunately, no serious injuries or deaths.
And it was in May that Governor George Wallace was the victim of an attempted assassination at a Maryland shopping center while speaking at a political rally. Mobilians were stunned.
There's more to come, so stay with us on Retrospect 72. Once again, progress marked the end of a month. On the 30th of May, a groundbreaking ceremony took place, ending months of court battles. It marked the beginning of construction of the controversial new federal building in downtown Mobile. June was another month which started with tragedy. A crop duster's plane apparently hit some telephone lines, causing the plane to flip over and crash near Robertsdale. The pilot was instantly killed. During the summer, several lives were lost in Mobile Bay. 3 young men went fishing late one afternoon. Their bodies were found days later. 2 other fishermen were never found, but their boat was recovered. The controversy over whether Mobile's major airport should be Bates Field or Brookley Field came to a full head of steam when Captain C.A. Barker of the Airline Pilots Association took sides.
I've been out there and looked at the terrain, and there's a 12-foot ditch that would be on either side of the center line. And if an aircraft had the misfortune of having a landing with a flat tire, getting off the runway a little bit, it looks to me like you'd just about scuttle it.
Mobile and the Gulf Coast were again spared a major tragedy when Hurricane Agnes came ashore June 19th along Florida's Panhandle. Damage was light, as hurricane damage goes, and there were few injuries and no deaths. It was the first and last hurricane of the season, and we got off light, but as that hurricane rolled north, destruction and death was unbelievable.
And on that note, we take a closer look at what happened as far as the weather was concerned during 1972. Danny Trainer kept track of it for us.
In the weather department, one would have to say, frankly speaking, that the weather was not a major newsmaker. Now, this is not to say that the weather did not present a problem to some people, but rather to point out that in the Channel 10 viewing area, that the weather did not cause major destruction, nor did it take a large number of lives. The weather was, however, of major importance to the agriculture industry in our area.
But to begin, let me make some general statements about weather near the Gulf of Mexico. While Mobile is located some 30 miles from the Gulf, its weather is influenced to a considerable extent by the Gulf. The summers are consistently warm, but kept from maximum temperatures by a sea breeze. The winters are usually mild, with January being our coldest month. On the average, we have less than 20 days below freezing, and usually we never get any colder than 23 degrees. The growing season will average about 274 days, or 75% of the year. Rainfall this year is our newsmaker, but during normal years the rainfall is among the highest in the United States. This is due mostly to summer thunder showers, with July and August being the most active months.
No report on weather would be complete without mentioning hurricanes. Hurricane Camille will never be forgotten by the Gulf Coast, but Mobile has not been directly hit by a destructive hurricane since 1926. The reason that Mobile has not been hit is mainly due to luck or chance.
Now, down to specifics. The first 6 months of 1972 set a tone for the year. If one word could describe it, that word just might be weird. The first day of January, just 10 days after the official start of winter, it was foggy for people coming home from New Year's Eve parties. And then everybody watched football bowl games with doors open because the temperature hit 76 degrees. January of 72 turned out to be a fairly good month, with 20 days of temperatures 70 or above and an excess of rainfall about 1.5 inches above normal. The average yearly rainfall is approximately 64 inches a year. We had 6 nights that fell below the freezing mark in January. By February, we had only 5 nights below 32 degrees, but generally speaking, the daytime temperatures were colder than it was in January. February is not noted as a big rain month, but it was the first month to show a shortage of rain that would bring Mobile nearly 25 inches short of its annual rainfall. March, the lamb and lion month, well, it took a big hunk out of our rainfall. We suffered over 1.5 inches of deficit rainfall. On the positive side, though, we had no nights with freezing temperatures, and the days were getting warmer. Spring was on its way.
April was a bad month for the farmer. April was almost 4.5 inches short of rainfall. Very important to spring planting.
If April did not hurt the farmers, then May certainly did. May dropped nearly 10 inches of rain in the Mobile area. This was 2 3/4 inches more than normal, and it hurt the potatoes and the tomatoes. The worst day of April was the 7th, with 4.5 inches falling in 17 hours. Building an ark that day might not have seemed that impractical. The major importance of June is that summer arrived in a big way, with 2/3 of the month reading 90 degrees or more. The rain was again in the minus column, but the big news was created by a hurricane named Agnes. She was predicted to hit near Port St. Joe, Florida, and hurricane warnings were up in areas like Panama City. Then Agnes touched ground on Monday, June the 9th. Agnes was nothing more than a big wind. Classified as a tropical storm, her highest winds were only 40 miles an hour. Before Agnes touched the U.S., however, she had taken 7 lives in Cuba. The same day that Agnes hit the United States, Panama City, Florida stated that they were going to file suit against the National Weather Service and the broadcast media for $1 million for frightening away tourists. Several days later, Governor Askew declared the area a disaster area, and thus ended the suit. The story of Agnes does not end here, because as the storm moved inland, heavy rain accompanied her movement. As she moved into the mountains of the Appalachians, the excessive rain caused flooding and death. When it was all over, the destruction was $3.5 billion, and 122 people had lost their lives. The only effect Agnes had on the Mobile, Pensacola area was about 2 inches of rain, but by the end of the month, Mobile was again short on its usual rainfall.
In the next segment, we will discuss the last 6 months of 1972, the lack of rain, and its effect on the fall harvest.
And what was the year without sports? We had a big sports year in the Channel 10 viewing area, and Jim Cobra's put together
The year 1972, as 22 years before, started as far as sports goes right here in Ladd Memorial Stadium. The occasion was the 23rd annual Senior Bowl All-Star football game. Played each year on the Saturday following the major college postseason bowl games, this contest is the first professional game for many of the future professional stars of the National Football League. In the 23rd annual Senior Bowl game, the South defeated the North All-Stars 26-21 in a close battle that saw Auburn's Pat Sullivan win a new automobile as the game's most valuable player. Sullivan was later drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. 35 of the players of the 1972 Senior Bowl made the NFL rosters this year, bringing the total to 235 Senior Bowl graduates active in professional football. Well, that started 1972 in sports, but by no means did it stop there. Mobile played host to many of the professional football greats like Archie Manning, then having just completed his rookie year with the New Orleans Saints and suffering the penalty of football, an injury that restricted play. The purpose of Manning's visit to Mobile was the grand opening of a new automobile dealership. That occasion also brought a member of the just-crowned Super Bowl champions, the Dallas Cowboys, linebacker Leroy Jordan.
The thing that I was excited was the way our team played when we had to. We knew our last playoff games in the Super Bowl, we had to play well, and our defense did. Coming into the Super Bowl, we knew if our offense could move the football, win the game.
It also marked one of the first and last professional appearances together of Auburn's dynamic duo quarterback Pat Sullivan and his favorite target, Terry Beasley. Attention was turning to spring sports and thoughts were on baseball, but there was some retirement talk in football. Green Bay quarterback Bart Starr, certainly one of the greats of pro football, was going to retire. That statement was quoted in a Nashville paper. But Starr, the featured speaker at the Mobile Touchdown Banquet early in March, said it wasn't so.
I think really it was just an error because I was talking with a very meant to represent me well.
It was only a month or so later that Bart Starr did announce his retirement from Green Bay, and the quarterbacking duties for the Packers fell upon the shoulders of former Alabama quarterback Scott Hunter from Pritchard. March also meant spring football practice. The Auburn Tigers had just completed their spring drills, and everyone wondered where head coach Ralph Jordan would go, with Pat Sullivan and Terry Beasley gone.
But I think the adjustment has to be made back to the running game and without so much emphasis on the passing game.
Late March saw the National Collegiate Athletic Association's basketball championship finals, and the final game came down to a court battle between defending champions UCLA and the Seminoles of Florida State. The final score, UCLA 81, Florida State 76.
What hurts? And when you come home and you get this type of reception, it doesn't ease the pain any because you see that there's so many people behind you. But in a few days, that'll go away, and I think our players will be proud.
College baseball season was well underway by April. The University of South Alabama Jaguars were off to a great start that saw them eventually capture the top spot in the nation.
I played one of my many miracle shots of the week out of the trees under the green and made par. And
April brought another sports celebrity to the port city, Olympic swimmer Debbie Meyer. She was one of the judges for the juniors contest and is probably one of the youngest retired athletes in the nation. Mark Spitz has been doing outstanding as far as world record comparison is concerned, and I know there are others. How do you think we'll do?
Well, I think the boys, men, will do great.
Mobile was in the process of getting a dog track, and in Pensacola, Greyhound Park was being remodeled for the start of what turned out to be a very successful season. The University of Alabama had finished spring practice, but head coach Paul Bryant said there was still quite a bit to do.
Anyway, we haven't looked like a first flag football team all spring.
Mobile hosted the state finals of the Special Olympics in the middle of May. Special education youngsters from all over the state gathered for the finals to see who would represent Alabama in the National Special Olympic Final. May also held an invitation to Gastonia and the District 3 playoffs for the University of South Alabama baseball Jaguars.
The University of South Alabama had been invited to participate in the District 3 playoffs.
On May 31st, it was off to Gastonia, with hopes for a berth in the College World Series for the South Alabama Jaguars. That ends the first half of a very busy year in sports, but the excitement was far from over, and we'll have a look at that in just a few minutes.
There's more to come, so stay with us on Retrospect 72.
For some strange reason, the second half of 1972 was busier than the first half. Our Channel 10 newsmen were kept on the run, twice the film they did in the first half of the year.
July began, as other months had, with tragedy. The Mobile County Sheriff's Department's chief investigator drowned while on a fishing trip. On July 3rd, the body of Tom Dees was found in the Tensaw River in Baldwin County. Officials said he apparently suffered a heart attack while changing a shearing pin in the boat motor's propeller.
July the 7th brought another storm to Mobile, causing problems for the Mobile County School Board.
This was a $5,000 greenhouse at Mobile County High School in Grand Bay. The unit was designed at VPI University in Blacksburg, Virginia. Wind and rain demolished the structure this past week. Transfer Corporation of Mobile supplied the greenhouse for the Mobile school system. The unit is made of corrugated vinyl and redwood. Nolan Construction Company installed the greenhouse, plus electrical system, heaters, and irrigation equipment. Only feet away from the greenhouse, portable classrooms were not damaged by the wind and rain. Mobile County School System purchased a greenhouse designed by a college professor, recommended by Transfer Corporation. This greenhouse gave way to winds, while portable classrooms built by Grand Bay residents didn't budge. Did the Mobile County School System choose the correct building materials when Transfer Corporation recommended vinyl and redwood? Dr. Benson says the school system cannot account for acts of God. Gary Mitchell, Channel 10 Newsbeat.
When Lear Siegler came to Mobile, it was acclaimed for bringing long-lasting employment. Channel 10 Newsbeat broke an exclusive story that the company, which is dependent upon federal contracts, was leaving Mobile. In mid-July, Channel 10 sent a crew to the Democratic National Convention in Miami Beach, Florida. It was there that Governor Wallace lost his bid for nomination to the presidency and, for that matter, his entire platform proposals. On July 20th, Alabama's Attorney General Bill Baxley held another news conference in Mobile, this time to announce he was filing suit to have oyster shell dredging in Mobile Bay stopped. A report on this attempt later. And so we moved into August with 3 men being sworn in as dog racing track commissioners, ending much political haggling.
Consumer Crusader Ralph Nader sent questionnaires to all congressmen, but not all of them, including were willing to fill them out. That one.
Ralph Nader, White Knight of the Consumer Crusade, has a new and complex target, the U.S. Congress. With his 800-member volunteer army, he may be aiming at the most vulnerable target to date.
Well, there will be a series of reports emerging. One report on committee studies analyzing the nature and performance of the various committees of Congress, one on various topics, including the election process, the rules, and so forth, and a third, a series of profiles on all the members of Congress, ranging in length from 30 to 40 pages, and covering topics such as the identities of the supporters of members of Congress, their performance, their allocation of time, campaign contributors, legislation introduced, and advocacy of the member, as well as floor votes and, for the first time, hopefully, committee votes.
One member of Congress who has reservations about the study is Jack Edwards of Mobile.
Well, I'm not opposed to the study. There are reports floating around in the Congress that some of the information that's been given by other congressmen has already been used in campaigns in an effort to defeat those congressmen. If that's the purpose of the study, then I don't think it's right.
Up to now, Ralph Nader has found an open door to members of Congress and strong support for his legislative programs. After the study is published, he may find more doors closed and less support. After all, it does make a difference whose foot the shoe pinches. For Channel 10 Newsbeat, this is Maria Thaler in Washington.
August had its share of tragedies, too, including a two-car wreck on Airport Boulevard that left 2 dead and 10 injured. As August neared its end, Channel 10 once again sent a crew to Miami Beach. This time, it was to watch the Republicans unanimously nominate Richard Nixon as their presidential candidate. The end of August saw construction well underway on the new downtown Mobile Federal Building, along with continued work on our Municipal Auditorium's newest addition. There's more to come, so stay with us on Retrospect 72.
In September, we experienced another massive fish kill, and experts were just as baffled as ever.
Residents in this area have begun terming the fish kill Mystery Soldier Creek. They consider it a mystery because there's never been a fish kill before in this creek that flows into Perdido Bay. Since the first of this month, some 15,000 to 20,000 fish have been killed, and it's still underway, with fish thrashing the water in death throes. Over a dozen species have been killed, ranging from menhaden to a porpoise. Tests last week showed the cause is not lack of oxygen or pesticides. Today, local, state, and federal officials toured the creek again, taking more fish and water samples. Dr. John Plum, Auburn University Department of Fisheries and Allied Agricultures, says fish he dissected last week were infested with the bacteria Aeromanus.
We feel that these organisms were involved in the fish mortality that's going on right now, and a good possibility, at least, that these fish were being killed by the bacterial infection that they had.
Well, how does this come about, getting this bacterial infection?
Well, usually, in most cases, it results from some sort of a stress factor that's placed on the fish that makes it more susceptible to the disease organism.
Is it common for this to happen in a body of water of this size?
Well, no, it's really not.
So far, the bacteria is believed the main culprit, but why such a heavy amount? The water and fish samples taken today will be completely analyzed for chemical content. Other similar fish kills have occurred elsewhere in South Baldwin County, including Bon Secour Bay. Perdido Bay area residents say they won't accept the bacteria theory. They say they feel St. Regis Paper Company near Pensacola might somehow be involved. However, St. Regis officials have repeatedly denied responsibility for any fish kills. It might take as long as a week before the complete analysis of the water and the fish can be made, and even then, when they find the problem, there may be no solution. John Keffer, Channel 10 Newsbeat.
Political history was made when attorney A.J. Cooper was elected mayor of Pritchard, Alabama, beating out longtime incumbent Vernon Capps. Cooper became the first black man to unseat a white incumbent in the history of the South. On that same day, we did some filming of oysters coming from the bay bottom, and the next day, Attorney General Baxley's suit to stop the dredging was denied in a Baldwin County courtroom. On the night of September the 20th, a young black man was shot by a Mobile policeman under a house following a high-speed chase from an alleged robbery. Testimony differed, and there was an immediate reaction from leaders of the black community, who claimed a civil rights violation of the young man. The case is still being investigated by the United States Justice Department. Mobile County schools still had problems, but this time it was with labor. On September the 25th, the custodial workers and bus drivers walked out. Within days, the walkout was ordered stopped by a court. On October the 2nd, A.J. Cooper was sworn in and took office as Pritchard's mayor in a fanfare of activities. And on October the 4th, 2 Navy training planes collided while practicing near Alberta in South Baldwin County. All 4 occupants of the 2 planes were killed. One of the year's highlights was the visit of Vice President Spiro Agnew on October the 11th. He was in Mobile to address a jam-packed municipal auditorium and endorse Winton Blunt and other GOP candidates. And on October the 23rd, Saraland's black laborers took their grievances to the streets. They picketed Saraland City Hall and complained of unfair working conditions. They went to the Personnel Board with no positive results. And 2 days later, the prisoners at Atmore State Prison went on strike. The men refused to labor in the fields, protesting what they called discriminatory practices at the prison. The court ordered the prison commission to correct the situations at the prisons and in the medical treatment division.
On October the 27th, another distinguished visitor came into the Channel 10 coverage area. This time, it was Julie Nixon Eisenhower, who was in Biloxi and Gulfport.
President Nixon, married to the son of former President Dwight Eisenhower, was in Gulfport and Biloxi, Mississippi this afternoon.
Julie Nixon Eisenhower was on a stopping tour with her father, President Nixon. Both stops today were at Nixon headquarters. The reception at both was large in relationship to the small crowds. Julie has made several stops in the eastern United States, stumping, and her reception has always been good. Here at Gulfport, she reminded the crowd of President Nixon's concern after Hurricane Camille struck the Gulf Coast.
You all remember when my parents were here at the time of the hurricane, and I was so glad to see when I flew in today that you've done so much to rebuild. It takes real courage to face such odds, and I admire you for all you've done to put your state back at the top.
After her remarks from the podium, Julie Nixon Eisenhower campaigned among the crowd. Channel 10 News had a chance to ask the president's daughter how the recent peace proposals will affect the campaign.
That as we see, the North has agreed to make major concessions. For the first time, they're not insisting on a coalition government, and it looks now as if we may have a settlement. I hope that they will continue with that, and I know they don't know what day the agreement will be signed, but I know they're working. He's been working for 4 years.
So regardless of the possibility of peace, the Republican Party is still going to continue the big push. They may be thinking back to the Truman Dewey election, but then most Republicans don't like to think about that election. Antoinette Marie, Channel 10 Newsbeat, Gulfport, Mississippi.
There's more to come, so stay with us on Retrospect 72. Mobile's civic and business leaders decided to try to get more people involved in the economic development of the area by organizing a new group. It was called Mach 80 and projected development through the 1980s. In the first week of November, a Mobile police officer called in that he had been ambushed by men with a shotgun. As it turned out, he had shot up his own police car. He was dismissed from the force immediately and pleaded guilty to the charge in court. On November the 7th, Mobile and the rest of the nation went to the polls. President Nixon was reelected to office, and Senator John Sparkman was sent back to Washington for another term. Both men won by landslides.
The Mobile County school system almost made it through the second half without trouble, but not quite.
The fighting broke out in the chorus room on the second floor of the school. From there, it progressed to all parts of the campus.
Theodore Principal Doyle James gave a brief statement to newsmen on today's trouble.
There have been 12 arrests, 4 are juveniles. There have been no serious injuries as far as we can determine at this time.
The students arrested by the county sheriff's department were charged with everything from resisting arrest, failure to obey a lawful order, destroying public property, to disorderly conduct. The fighting between black and white students seesawed over most of the Theodore campus. Mobile County Sheriff's deputies broke up incident after incident and then made arrests. They moved the students off campus as quickly as possible. Alabama state troopers also were used to control the fighting at Theodore. After moving the largest group of students to the far side of the campus, fighting then broke out there. Mobile County Sheriff's deputies, state troopers, and Mobile City Police then began making more arrests. Janet Williams is a Theodore student. She was a close friend of the teacher whose classroom was the scene of the original outbreak.
I don't think that they had been really planning anything like this. I think it just came up when they decided that today was their day to run over Miss Bulow, and it just started out. They were upsetting her quite a bit, and the white boys just got a little tired of it and just broke out.
During the sporadic incidents that flowed over the Theodore campus, both black and white student leaders and biracial committee members were trying to stop those fights.
Even though this was the second such racial incident at Theodore High School in less than a school year, spontaneous is still the key word for school administration officials. Bob Kennan, Channel 10 News, Theodore High School.
The new dog track racing facility finally became a reality as ground was broken on November the 28th, with the operators promising racing by this coming summer. November ended with Florida becoming the first state to reinstate the death penalty, and Channel 10 was there when Governor Reuben Askew made his plea against a mandatory death penalty. It was later approved by the legislature, but opposed by several groups, including the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Pensacola. On December the 5th, the Mobile City Commission was informed there were enough signatures on a petition calling for a change in our form of city government in Mobile. The commissioners set an election for next February. December brought death to a Pritchard grocer who was needlessly shot by a hold-up man in his tiny grocery store. Witnesses said the man was shot before he could hand over the money demanded by the hold-up man. Ray Charles Phillips was arrested by the FBI in Texas on suspicion of murder, and 2 others were jailed in Pritchard in connection with the robbery murder. A bomb threat caused concern for police and airlines officials on December the 11th, when an anonymous caller said that a bomb had been placed aboard a National Airlines plane at Bates Field. A search was made, no bomb was located, and the plane continued after a considerable delay. A 200-year-old dream came true on December the 12th when Governor George Wallace threw a switch to simulate an explosion starting construction of the Tennessee Tom Bigby waterway. The action ended years of court fights over the project.
The second half of 1972 had its weather story also. Prepared a report for us.
The last 6 months of 1972 are now the subject of our year-end report on the weather. But this presents a little bit of a problem as December is not over yet. We now stand with almost 25 inches in lack of rainfall, or almost 40% less than normal. The lack of rain has had its hardest impact on the farmer's pocketbook and has resulted in a poor fall harvest. Pecans and soybeans were the hardest hit, but corn and cotton suffered too. The month of July delivered a big blow to farmers by being almost 7.5 inches under in rain. August delivered the kiss of death with a deficit of 4 more inches. In 2 months, we were 11.5 inches short of rain, and as I stated before, July and August are the months for summer showers, except for 1972. Oh, and by the way, do you have an air conditioner? If so, you probably noticed that your electricity bill was high during July and August. The reason was the lack of afternoon thunder showers. With no relief from the heat in the afternoon, your air conditioner had to work longer and harder. The only good note during these summer months was we never reached 100 degrees, but we did reach 99, but only once. Fall did not arrive in September like it should. For 26 days, we had 90 degrees or above. Your air conditioner was still on. Relief did come in October when only 2 days were 90 or above. November brought the first of the cold weather, but only briefly, as did December. But other events took place during 1972, like the retirement of Mr. William Tilson as meteorologist in charge of the Mobile Office of the Weather Service. Mr. Tilson retired from the Bureau after 42 years of service, and a commendation from the President on his work during Hurricane Camille. Before Mr. Tilson retired, he unveiled a new service for Mobile, a 24-hour weather radio station, heard in Mobile at 162.55 megacycles and in Pensacola at 162.40 megacycles. In 1973, the Weather Service has plans that will help predict the weather along the Gulf Coast. A weather buoy is to be placed in the Gulf that will tell us what happens to a weather front while they're out over the water. Stationary fronts will be of prime interest because They often moved back over land, bringing rain. Now the final pages of 1972's weather book are slowly drawing to a close, and with it goes the notation that rainfall was a harmful factor to everyone. But other than that, the weather was not a major newsmaker. Our New Year's resolution, if we were asked to make one, might be to be as accurate as possible and use all the data and scientific information available. Renew my membership in the American Meteorological Society, and keep the Farmer's Almanac handy. I hope 1973 is a good year for you.
Busy watching local high school football and other events in the world of sports.
The second half of the sports year started as Beth Berry, member of the U.S. Curtis Cup team, prepared to leave for Europe and that competition. The U.S. team emerged successful there, and in all, Beth competed in 7 major amateur golf tournaments during the year, defending her titles in the Women's Southern Amateur Tourney and the Alabama State Tournament. A successful year for the former University of South Alabama golfer, but disappointment at South as the Jaguars returned from Gastonia, defeated by Mississippi in the final 2 games of the District 3 playoffs to determine the representative for the College World Series.
It's been a wonderful season, and we're not too disappointed. We just hate that. I personally felt a little dejected because all the parents and all the friends were up there.
The hard play of the Jaguars didn't go unnoticed, however. Al Ryan was one of 4 Jaguars who eventually signed a professional contract. The month of July means fishing, and this year was no exception as the Junior Chamber of Commerce hosted their annual Alabama Deep Sea Fishing Rodeo. It was the middle of August, and high school football practice was already underway for a season that held one of the earliest opening dates that could be remembered. High school football was in full swing by this time, with a 35-game schedule being played here at Memorial Stadium. In Germany, it was the Olympic Games, and an incident that shocked the world. Israeli athletes were taken hostage by an Arab group. The result, death for the athletes. In Mobile, memorial services were held for the fallen Olympians. Mobile was host to another legend in the sports world, LPGA golfer Patty Berg. Miss Berg was in the port city to participate in a rehabilitation program, hoping to return to the professional tour. A serious illness had left her weak, and Mobile's Tommy Littleton had helped her recover once before. He's doing it again. 1972 was also a reasonably good year for Mobile welterweight Jack Tillman. 11 fights during the year, 6 knockouts, and 5 decisions. For the 10th-ranked welterweight, 1973 should be the year he's worked for. A fight in Mobile in mid-January, a return match with Billy Backus in Syracuse, and the 1st of March promises a fight in Madison Square Garden. November was football playoff time. Fairhope and Davidson had berths assured when they finished in the top 8 in Class 4A. A happy send-off at Davidson. The Warriors then disappointed in an overtime loss to Banks. It was nearly the same story in Fairhope, the Pirates being eliminated by Huffman. November 25th, Mobile honors one of her many Major League Baseball players. It was Billy Williams Day in the port city, as the Cubs outfielder was presented with numerous awards commending his achievements in professional baseball.
This is one of the beautiful things that could happen.
Spring Hill College opened their basketball campaign November 27th, starting on a 23-game schedule, marking their first year of play in the Gulf States Conference. South Alabama opened their basketball campaign with the first full squad recruited under head coach Jimmy Taylor. You know, the year is coming to a close when the Crichton Optimist Club names their high school football back in lineman of the year. This year, Elsie Witherspoon of Viker and Dale Halliday of Gill tied for back of the year honors, and Walter Kennedy of Davidson was named lineman of the year. Spring Hill Holiday basketball tournament started tonight while South Alabama prepares for the Senior Bowl basketball tournament. Both teams wanting to improve on a season that so far has been mostly losses. It is growing to new heights, football upsets highlighted by the Auburn-Alabama thriller, and hundreds of other events that included the Olympics. Baseball strike by the players, the Cowboys and Lakers finally winning the big ones, the World Chess Championship, the Indy 500, and many, many more. All made for a very competitive and successful 1972 that set the goals for 1973, the first of which, Ladd Stadium filled to watch the January 6th Senior Bowl.
We found 1972 to be a fascinating year as far as along the Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida Gulf Coast. We look back on the tragedy and hope that it won't repeat itself in the years to come. Forward to more of the good things in life: economic development, cooperation among the peoples of both health, happiness, and prosperity for all of our citizens.
Remember is a place from long ago. Remember, filled with everything you know. Remember, when you're sad and feeling down. Remember, turn around. Remember, life is just a memory. Remember, close your eyes and you can see. Remember, think of all that life can be. Remember, love is only in a dream. Remember, life is never as it seems. Dream.